Hello again, everybody. The video today is about Manjaro's 19.0 release candidates. We're on version 2. I'm going to take a look at the GNOME, Plasma, and XFCE editions in this video. I'll put some timestamps below so that you can skip to the part that you want if you only want to see one of them in particular. That way you'll be able to jump ahead and get to what you want. So with that, let's jump in. We have Manjaro GNOME, again 19.0 RC2. Let's jump in here and see what we've got. So right away I notice that there is a new desktop wallpaper here. Everything else seems to be pretty standard for the Manjaro GNOME setup. And other than that, there are a bunch of extensions installed as well, and I'll take a look at those in a minute. But I thought I'd pull up the forum post that's explaining what the release candidates are. We'll take a look at the notes. So Phil is saying that he's proud to release our candidate build of the upcoming Manjaro GNOME 19.0 Kyria release. It's based on the stable branch, so that means you're going to get GNOME 3.3.4, and there are visual refreshes for a number of applications and the desktop itself, which of course we're seeing with the wallpaper in the background. The background selection settings also received a redesign, making it easier to select custom backgrounds. By default, we added our own dynamic wallpaper that changes throughout the day, which is actually pretty neat. It's different variations of the same wallpaper, just lighter or darker, depending on the time of day. The GNOME layout switcher also enables you to change your desktop layer easily with preset layouts that mimic popular operating systems. So you've seen probably layout switchers. So Mate Tweaks has something where you can switch different layouts. Zorin has that as well. And many others, not just those two, those are the ones that come to mind. And they just basically let you very quickly change the layout and look of your desktop. So they mentioned specifically Manjaro, which is what you're getting out of the box. Vanilla GNOME, so it'll disable dash to panel, and then you'll have it'll also take away the window controls. So essentially a vanilla GNOME look and feel. Mate GNOME 2, traditional desktop Windows, so that'll be dash to panel with arc menu. Modern desktop Mac OS, so that's going to be a dock on the bottom and a bar at the top, and also Unity Ubuntu theme, which will be the bar all the way along the left. Essentially the same layout, but with dash to panel set to panel mode so that it stretches the entire left side of the screen. We also automatically change between dark and light theme when night light is triggered, which is pretty cool. I'll show that as well. A new login screen theme and the addition of Farrell's game mode. So lots of new great stuff in the 19.0 release. And they just go through and do a bullet point of basically everything they just said. So we can run through these and take a look at each one. So we already saw the login screen, and it's the GDM login screen with some customizations. I think I saw the Manjaro logo, maybe some things like that. But for the most part, it's standard GDM theme. GNOME layout switcher. So that's what we just went through. And this is part of the hello that you see when you first start. There's a layouts manager button here. And here we go. These are all the traditional desktop paradigms, desktop layouts, whatever you want to call it. And so we could just flip through these. Let's look at traditional. And essentially what's happening here is it's going in and enabling different extensions that are already installed. So if I just take a look at tweaks, I can look at the extensions that are here. Arc menus enabled, dash to panel, desktop icons. So there's a bunch of stuff that they include by default, and this switching process is going to enable or disable them based on the layout that they're trying to achieve. So Unity is going to go back to dash to panel, like I said. Then we go modern. Then this is going to be more of like a Mac OS layout. And sure enough, we've got dash to panel again, but set to be centered on the screen and not take up the entire bottom. Then we have the standard GNOME, which takes away all of the panels. It did leave the window controls, which I thought maybe it would take those away. If you notice, when we switched to the Mac OS, it actually switched these to the left as well. So it does make some changes, not only in the extensions, but then also in tweaks itself, where it's putting different window controls and things like that. And the last one would be more of a GNOME to Mate look, which is very familiar for folks that have used that in the past or are using Mate now. And I'll just switch back to the standard Manjaro layout. And then from here under settings, there's some other options. So we mentioned the dynamic wallpaper settings, GNOME tweak tool, online accounts is just a quick shortcut to the settings panel for online accounts. Something that wasn't enabled right away for me was the automatic dark theme. So it's after sunset here for me, so I have a dark theme showing up here. And that just means that any of the applications are going to follow whatever theme is set. And I'll show how that changes along with the wallpaper just by changing the system time. So the other option here is system tray and whether or not you see icons, and that it's going to be K-status notifier extension. All right, so let's take a look at the dynamic wallpaper and the theme switcher. So if I come in here and set my time date to be something like, let's say 8 a.m., you see that my desktop wallpaper changed. And interestingly, my theme did not change. Now this had worked earlier, and I wonder, see, something in changing those layouts, the default is to not have automatic dark theme. And so I'm guessing if I were to change a layout again, it's going to unset that option. So just keep in mind that if you change these, you may want to come in and just see what is enabled and what isn't based on that. Let's just go ahead and test this. So if I go to, let's say, modern again, let's see what happens. Yeah, see, it went back. No. So here's the thing. It still shows automatic dark theme. I bet you if I close this, oh, see, it moved my buttons on me. I bet you if I close this and come back in, yeah. And so it disabled a bunch of extensions, but it didn't update this view to show you what was current in the settings. So that's a bit of an oversight, and maybe it's something they've seen, but it's feedback that I'll definitely give to them, because that's going to be frustrating for people to not understand that that's what's happening. So let me set that back. And again, you see the theme changes because it's now thinks it's 8 a.m. And I'm going to switch back again, and I bet you the same thing's going to happen. Yep, and if I come back, I'm not trying to belabor the point, but you can just see how that would be, you know, just annoying if that kept happening. It should respect these separately from the layouts, in my opinion. So hopefully if I give them that feedback, that's something they consider. I don't know how this switcher, but how it bundles all of these actions, how it's scripted, that kind of thing. These may be embedded as part of that. I would say that's probably the case simply because when you're on the default GNOME layout, you're probably not going to have the system tray enabled, something like that. So anyway, the settings are here. If you do need to come back in and change them, even though that's maybe a little inconvenient right now, it's not that difficult to do. You saw that the desktop wallpaper changed. So that's that dynamic wallpaper setting. And if you were to come into this settings option, you can see there's a way to open this and change that. I'm just going to demonstrate one more time just how that looks when I switch back. So let me open this again. You can see I'm on the light theme. Now, if I set this back to, say, 10 p.m., you see my theme changed. And sometimes it takes a minute for the wallpaper to catch up. It maybe just isn't running. It's not continuously polling and checking to see what time it is. I think it checks in every so often. So if I come back here and look at the dynamic wallpaper settings, you have to open the file itself, and then you see, so these are the three variants of the wallpaper. This is the morning, afternoon, and evening. And eventually it will pick up the fact that I changed the clock to 10 p.m. All right, so let's take a look back at the other notes here. Optional Firefox theme to integrate Firefox better to GNOME applications. Run Fire GNOME enable SH. All right, well, why don't we? So it looks like it installed a theme. And let me close out and come back in. All right, and so look like maybe it's picked up on the dark aspect of the theme a little better. If we look at add-ons and themes, it says it's still enabled to default. Oh, see there, the wallpaper got picked up. It says it's still enabled to the default, but I'll have to look at the video again. Maybe it's exactly the same and I'm just seeing something else, but it looked like it was a little different when I started up again. Okay, drag and drop support for desktop icons. That's great. That's been an issue for GNOME. I know the Ubuntu 19.10 release has an extension that enables desktop icons, but it's separate from Nautilus so that you can't actually drag files between the desktop and Nautilus. But it looks like they're saying here that they've been able to do that. So I'm guessing if we look at tweaks, it's probably just a different extension. And I'm not going to drag this out and look through every single one of these. Desktop icons NG, that must be it. It's just a different extension that must have figured out a way to do it properly. Interesting side note, GNOME 3.36 that should be out in a month or so, they've started to make some changes to be friendlier to extensions. So you see I have to come to tweaks to see extensions here. The other option I have is I can go to GNOME extensions on the web or through a browser on the web. Yes, I'm old, I know. And add this extension, and then I'm able to also manage extensions through a web browser as well. So you're seeing the same list of things, and you can actually get the settings here as well, or update things. Some of them have settings, some of them don't. So anyway, that's just neither here nor there in case you didn't know about that. But the point I was trying to make is that in GNOME 3.36, they are including a native extensions management tool. So it's a GUI for essentially, I'm guessing, doing what's in tweaks, but just as an application that's already on your system. A lot of distros don't include tweaks by default. That was certainly the case for a long time. I'm starting to see more and more that any GNOME-based distros are including tweaks more and more now. So I don't think that's as big an issue as it was before. You'd have to get tweaks and then have to do a whole bunch of separate things here. And I guess really my point is that it looks like GNOME themselves are starting to say, look, we realize that people are using extensions, even if it's just a handful. So if I were to just look at my desktop, for example, I'm running GNOME as well. But if I look at tweaks, I don't tend to run a ton of extensions. So I've got clipboard indicator for my clipboard, dash to dock, GS Connect, case status notifiers so that I can have my tray, and then no annoyance. And then, oh yeah, the sound output chooser, which just gives you a nice little menu here to click and select things. So it just kind of adds back little features, and none of these are, all that transformative other than, I guess, the dash to dock. I mean, GS Connect, I think a lot of people are running to connect their Android phones. So anyway, the gist being that it looks like GNOME is in fact starting to recognize, look, people are using GNOME and they're using extensions, so we should have more of a first-class formal way to support that. That's a bit of a tangent, I know, but just thought I'd throw that in there since we were talking about 3.34 and maybe some of the changes coming up in 3.36. So this was the RC1 announcement. And if we look at the RC2 announcement, it's really the same information except that changes since RC1, updated Calamares to use KPM Core 4, and then just some small fixes overall. So that's really the essence of this release. And I have to say that they really, they're focused on, I think, what makes sense to their broad user base. They're adding extensions that make life easy for people to use GNOME. The layout switcher itself, I think, is kind of the killer feature simply because you have such an easy way to get to the layout you're comfortable with and get started. You can always tweak it from there, but just to be able to say, I prefer this on the bottom to look more like, let's say, what Zorin looks like, or I like Unity and the Ubuntu layout, so I'm going to put that on the left and have it look like that. This just gets you where you need to be much, much more quickly, And then, of course, you have some of the finite controls here. And you can still come into tweaks and you can still do customizations, but that gives you that just hit the ground running and get started. So I think that's a great addition. I think that's something we're going to see more and more. And maybe that's in response to people looking at Linux, coming from Windows, coming from Mac, coming from a different experience where they are used to it being a certain way and just want it to look that way. And otherwise they're kind of thrown off. They might come in here and say, well, what is this? You know, I'm used to it being down here because they're a Mac user or whatever the case is. I think that's smart on their part to include something like that and to make it a first class part of their GNOME experience. So great job, Manjaro. Looks like 19.0 for the GNOME desktop is going to be great. All right, so now let's jump over and take a look at the KDE Plasma release. This is, again, the 19.0 release candidate for Manjaro. And I believe this is running 5.17.5 version of Plasma at this point. We'll take a look. Notice this login screen. I know that's a part of the new release, but let's just take a look really quick. Yeah, so we're still on 5.17.5. Manjaro, they hold back packages, and maybe that's not the best way to say that. They have their own repositories, so they are derivative of Arch. They're taking the upstream Arch packages, putting them in their own repository, and then they have different branches. So they've got an unstable, a testing, and a stable branch. All of their release candidates are based on the stable branch, so whatever is in stable at this point is what's going to be in release candidate. Now, I have no doubt that very soon that they will update to 5.18 for Plasma as soon as it hits their stable branch. And it's, as far as I know, it's in testing right now. I'm sure there's a way to just easily update this to the testing branch if that's what you'd rather do. Just know, like, that what we saw with GNOME 3.3.4, you're going to see with Plasma and everything else. Manjaro just is a little more conservative in their packages in the way that they push out updates. And I think that's really, for me, one of the advantages and secrets about Manjaro is it's rolling. You're going to get those updates, but they go into at least some amount of testing before they just get thrown out there. Some people have a complaint about Arch where, as a rolling distro, things just get pushed out, and literally the minute that they hit the repositories, you're going to get notifications on updates if you have such a thing enabled. I know, running Arch myself, if I have a system update utility that's checking every few hours, I'll literally get updates, 3-4 times a day sometimes. And you can choose not to update right away, but at some point you do have to update. Anyway, I'm rambling a little bit. Point being, I think if you don't really understand the difference between plain mainline Arch and Manjaro, that's a key thing to keep in mind, is that Manjaro is based on Arch. They have their own repositories that they manage, and they will push out updates once they've had some amount of testing done. And I think that just allows them to manage that process a little better. So it is rolling, but it's almost more of a snapshot, because things roll from unstable to testing and then to stable. When they hit stable, they hit as a larger group. So you just heard me mention how the Arch updates come in. You'll get an update several times a day in some cases, but it'll just be for 1 or 2 things. Whereas with Manjaro, when their stable push comes out, you'll get a big chunk of things all at once. So it's like a curated update. I don't know the best way to explain it, but that's just definitely one of the big differences. And honestly, I think one of the key differences between regular Arch and Manjaro. All right, enough of that. So let's take a look at the forum and see what they've got going on here for the release candidate notes. All right. Most obvious addition for the edition and edition. Most obvious addition for the 19.0 edition is the Breath 2 theme, which I absolutely agree. So we've got a new wallpaper, and the Breath 2 theme includes new icons. It's a Plasma 5 theme, splash animation, which you saw when I was logging in, the SDDM theme, and the wallpaper, which is great. And then also Yaquake, which is their drop-down terminal, has some new themes as well. Kate inherits a couple of new color schemes based around, I believe they're meant to look like VS Code. if I'm not mistaken. So if I go to Kate, and we look at view schema. Yes, so Visual Studio Dark, Visual Studio Light. So it's on light right now, which is the top screenshot. And the dark has that nice blue, faded blue and light blue look. I think a lot of people really like that theme. They've also given an alternative to the standard kickoff menu, which is this one, which is the, if you right click, I guess it's not fair to just assume everybody knows how to use Plasma, but in Plasma, just as a quick side note, a lot of the functionality, there are alternatives. And basically what that means is for the menu, for the system tray, for these icons, for these things, if you right click something, in some cases, you'll see show alternatives. And when you do that, you get a list of other options to do the same thing. So in this case, it's the menu. And what I normally use is application menu, and it's just a much simpler condensed menu. But they've also included now this simple menu. And this is going to be, I think, a much better experience for a lot of people. Let me get that out of the way. Where, I actually put this behind it so you get a little contrast. This is much, much simpler. And it looks a lot more like maybe something you'd see in Budgie, Elementary, Mate. All of those menus are intentionally, I think, a little more straightforward and simple and easy to use. Whereas some of the KDE menus, and particularly the default one of Kickoff, which they call Application Launcher, this is a little bit of a mess simply because you have to interact with it in different ways. So these are your favorite applications, and you come into applications, and then you've got the different categories, and then to get to them, you have to click in, and then you've got all these different options here. To get back, you have to navigate up here. And so it's kind of messy because you've got all of these different ways of interacting. And so it's not as straightforward as something like if I switch back to the simple menu. This is doing the same thing, but it's just doing it in a much more direct and straightforward way. So when I highlight internet or hover over it, I just see my choices. I don't have to click through and see the animation and drill down and then have to drill back and all of that. I can just very easily come through here. And by default, all applications means you'll see your favorites on the first page. And then as you flip through these, and I'm using either my mouse wheel or you can click these pages, the page indicators, you get to see everything that's on the system. And I think that's just a cleaner, more straightforward way. And then also search is going to work. So let's say I wanted to search for conversation. You know, as I start typing, I'm getting results. So yeah, I think this is a great option for a lot of people. And particularly if this is the default, I think it's just an easier way for new people to Plasma to use that menu and to get to the applications, and it just gets out of your way, right? And it should be easy to use a computer and simple. Sometimes KDE can be a little focused on extreme functionality, you know, the ability to customize everything, the ability to really tailor things and change things. And there's a lot of power user kind of stuff there, which is great for people who know how to use it. But if it gets in the way of someone just using the system, I think that's where there's some conflict. And if they were to put something like this as a more straightforward menu option, I think it would make a better first impression. And hey, if someone wants to come in and play around and show alternatives, good for them, right? It gives them the choice to do that. But as the starting point, it's a little simpler. Now, it hasn't won me over. I'm still using this menu simply because it does basically all the same things. And I like this layout with the flyouts a little better than the box. But either way, right? The fact that you have those alternatives is really great. So by default, they're using the icon only task manager here. Most distributions and implementations of Plasma are using this task manager view, which just means you see the icon and then the task itself. That's very Windows 7-esque, right? XP, Windows 7. I think a lot of people might like that better, but the more sort of modern way, I think, is people are used to the icons as well. This is Windows 10, and I use this personally on Plasma, even though it's not the default. So I end up changing the menu to this and then icons to that. And again, very configurable, which is a good thing in most cases, unless it gets in your way. And then we see the changes since RC1, fixing the missing icon. Yeah, these are all just pretty straightforward little fixes. Yeah, so I mean, this is very attractive. I can't say I'm the biggest fan of teal in the world, but for some reason, Manjaro does it in a way that just makes it look really, really nice. And as an accent color, it's just very pretty. And so if I come into Dolphin here, that might be a little strong for folks. Even though I'm not a huge fan of dark themes, the Breath to Dark is very, very pretty. So if I come in and just take a look at, this always throws me off. Manjaro includes their admin tools in the control panel. So I'm so used to these being the top options every time I come in here, because I don't use Manjaro Plasma all that often. It throws me off that these are here because it's a whole list of things that I'm not used to. Anyway, just saying that might catch you up too. It always sort of throws me off. But it's nice to have these here because you know where to come to get them, and install your drivers, change your kernels. Again, if you're not familiar with Manjaro, this is one of their strengths. Besides the package management, they also have a lot of custom tools. So you can very easily change your kernel, install proprietary drivers or open source ones, just driver manager in general, language packs, locale. So they make it very easy to administer your system. And it's really nice that in Plasma they just bake this right into the control panel. All right, so what I was going for was the theme. So we're on Breath 2, which is what we want. Plasma style, I want Breath Dark, which we've already got. Under colors, I want to switch to Breath to Dark. And so now, I think this is just, again, I'm not a huge dark theme fan, but I just really like what they've done here. I like the border. The shading is just right. It's dark, but it's not too dark. So there isn't a huge amount of blown out contrast between black and white. You still get some nice shading. So we saw in GNOME, right, that they had that layout switcher. And I think they're heading down the path of providing something like, if you've seen Farron OS, the first experience you have is walking through how you want your desktop to be laid out. He also has that same type of layout switcher that does exactly the same thing. That's on Plasma. And he also takes you through the theming so that you can set those options. I think if they gave you a way, and you know what, I'm saying this and I wonder if Hello has something like this. I don't think it does. No. Anyway, maybe if in here, in Hello, there was a very simple way to get to themes. This is, I think, something that Farron got right. One of many things he got right is, I had to dig down into several different layers to find the specific setting I wanted. So if there was a way to draw that up to the surface, make that more accessible to the first-time user or the inexperienced Plasma user who wouldn't know to go through those steps, I think that would be a great pickup and a great win for Manjaro to go down that same path. And we've seen that, again, the precedent is there for others who have done that. So they could probably reuse some of that, or, maybe reuse it and enhance it. And that's the nature of open source, right? Somebody comes up with a solution, puts it out there, others can adopt it, adapt it, update it, improve it, all of that great stuff. And so maybe that's somewhere they're headed. For now, I really can't complain because this does look great and seems to be working very well. I did use the preview release on hardware and didn't see any issues with it. So I assume this is along the same lines. I don't expect that there would be any issues here, but that's why these are out as release candidates. If you have an interest, I would say go take a look. Other people are leaving their feedback, and you may find something new that others haven't seen and can contribute back. Okay, well, I'm going to finish this out by looking at the main Manjaro release or desktop, and that is XFCE. I am not an XFCE user. I have nothing against it personally. It just doesn't work for me as well as the others or appeal to me. It works perfectly fine. It is solid. I can't complain. And many, many people love the simplicity, the stability, and just the straightforward nature of XFCE. And if that's the case for you and you like XFCE and you've never looked at Manjaro, then I think it's worth taking a look at because they really do some nice things in here. So again, we've got some lovely theming and the same welcome screen. And we will jump out and take a look at the forum to see what is different. Not having used the previous releases of Manjaro XFCE, I really don't know what I'm looking for. So I want to just check the notes and make sure I'm not overlooking anything. For those of you that are long-term XFCE users, you're probably going to laugh at me because I don't know my way around. And there are probably things that are obvious that I'm missing. So I apologize ahead of time. I just wanted to include it because it is the stock sort of standard first choice desktop in Manjaro. All right. So in the forum post, Phil is mentioning that he's proud to release the stable candidate build of the upcoming Manjaro XFCE 19.0 Kyria release. It's based on stable branch. The XFCE edition remains our flagship offering and has received the attention it deserves. Few can claim to offer such a polished, integrated, and leading-edge XFCE experience. We ship XFCE 4.14 with this release of Manjaro. We mainly focused on polishing the user experience on the desktop and window manager, and on updating some components to take advantage of newly available technologies, such as optimization of our theme we call Matcha. The new feature, Display Profiles, allows you to store one or more profiles for a particular display configuration that you might be using. To make the deal a little sweeter, we implemented auto-applying of profiles when new displays are connected. So this would be really handy if you have a laptop that you use at home with, let's say, an external monitor, and then maybe at work you have the same laptop, but you have a dock and it's using two monitors. So I can see how that would be hugely beneficial because in a lot of desktop environments, it doesn't always remember the position, the resolution, the scaling. So all of the things that you might want to set to configure in a multi-display setup, sometimes different desktop environments don't do a great job of remembering that. Also, the fact that this is giving you profiles would let you be able to set customizations for different environments. So maybe you have the same monitor at home and at work. It's possible. And it sees that monitor and it just assumes, well, I know what this is. I've seen it before, so I'm just going to apply what I remember about it. But that's not exactly what you're looking for. Maybe you want to customize it a different way. Well, then this gives you that option to do that. So I can see how that would, from a quality of life standpoint, I could see that that's just a huge thing for probably a good number of people. All right, so we talked about the polishing of the Matcha theme, including the dark variant. Whisker menu can now be more customized, and that's our default little menu down here. Additional wallpaper to match the theme changes, fixing bugs and featuring improved translations, and more features added to PAMAC. Now, I didn't touch on PAMAC yet in GNOME or Plasma, but all of these are using PAMAC, and PAMAC is the graphical package manager and update system that Manjaro has written for managing Arch-based packages. So it allows you to not only get software from Manjaro's repositories, but they're also doing things like incorporating snaps and flatpaks. They've already got snaps in there, and I believe flatpaks are coming. They allow you to install things from the AUR, which if you're not familiar with Arch, the AUR is a repository of user packages. So the Arch repository and the Manjaro repository includes a tremendous amount of software. There is, thousands upon thousands of software packages available, but sometimes something you want isn't there, and you either have to go find it somewhere or get it as a snap or a flatpak, or you can use the AUR, and someone has already done the work of figuring out how to download the source code or the binary and, pull in dependencies, all of that fun stuff. And then you can just use that AUR helper in PAMAC to install things. It's its own topic completely. I'm not going to do it justice here, but just know that PAMAC is pretty amazing because they are trying to pull in all of these different sources. So if I just look for PAMAC here, They call it add remove software. But I assure you, this is PAMAC. There we go. And it's just a very pleasing application to use in terms of software management in a graphical software manager. I mean, I guess you could say this is something similar to maybe Aptitude on Debian-based releases. Essentially, graphical package manager, right? Not a software center, not something that's going to act in a software store or software center. It's more of a manager. This kind of blurs the lines and blends the two in some ways. It's still very technically minded and functional, where it's showing you the list of packages and letting you drill in and look at stuff, see what's already installed and interact with it, find updates for your system. So here's some things that need to be updated. So it's very useful from just a straight package perspective, but then it does also have some things like categorization, and you can very easily kind of come through here and find specific things you might be looking for. And of course, you can search. You can go by groups or repositories. This is just a very well done, iterated approach. And by iterated, I mean, we're on, I think it's at version 9 something at this point. Yeah, 9.302. So it's a well-tested, well-developed, long-standing application. And it just, for my purposes, it works great. Even if I'm not running Manjaro, let's say I'm just on Arch or even on Endeavor, which is still Arch, but it's just a different way of getting Arch, I will still, in a lot of cases, install PAMAC because it's in the AUR and still have access to this great tool, even though I'm not on Manjaro. It's that good. So yet another differentiator for Manjaro in case you're not familiar. All right, so that's pretty much my rundown of an XFCE. I'm just going to flip through and open a couple things. Again, this is more for people who are interested in XFCE and want to see what the changes are. I will make some observations as to why XFCE, why I don't use it. And this first thing that I hit on is something that always bugs me. And I know it's easy to grab the corners at the top, at least the top right, or maybe not. But this is something that is, as a user, just drives me absolutely bananas, is the fact that this is like a 2 pixel, 3 pixel grab area. And that it just drives me crazy. I have some physical limitations in my hands and things, and so sometimes I don't have the best accuracy when it comes to a pointing device, whether that's a mouse or my touchpad. And honestly, I think this is even worse on a touchpad than it is with an external mouse. I'm not going to beat this to death, but just you can see like how small that is. All right, that's enough of that. So the whisker menu, yeah, this looks great, and I'm pretty sure I can just grab the corner here and resize it, which I have always thought was just so cool. Like, you want it to be that big? Great. Why not? Like, that is the definition of user choice right there. What a great user experience, right? Just fantastic. So yeah, whisker menu, I've always been a huge fan of. The other thing with Manjaro, in case you're not familiar, they tend to include a good bit of default software. So some distros will have a very sparse collection where it's just a web browser, an email client, terminal, file manager, real basic set of apps, maybe an Office suite, but not a ton. And, some of it is to keep the size down. Some of it is to not overwhelm users with too many choices. Some of it is, not wanting to make the choices for the users. There's lots of different reasons why they may choose to do that. Manjaro, they kind of just throw out there that they're going to include a bunch of stuff that they find useful for most people. So if you go through the different categories, the Steam installer, which is just a launcher. Steam's not actually installed yet. If you click that, it's going to want to download and install. You've got some graphics applications, not only a browser, but IRC chat, Pigeon, Thunderbird. Under multimedia, you've got music players and video players and pulse audio volume control installed by default. The QT V4L, this is for tuning your webcam. so you can adjust your webcam using that utility. These are a lot of things that I think a lot of people either use regularly or need and maybe don't know. Like this, I really wasn't aware of this utility before I started using Manjaro. I got a new webcam, couldn't really figure out how to change the settings. There are lots of different ways to do it, but I couldn't find an application that made it sort of straightforward. And fortunately, this made it a very easy process. And so now whatever distro I'm on, I use Qt v4L, and it works great. You know, Manjaro says, hey, let's throw that in there because I'm sure a significant portion of our user base has web cameras and would like a way to configure them. So great. Office, I didn't install the Office suite. When you install Manjaro, you get the choice of installing LibreOffice or FreeOffice or no Office. And because these are just demo virtual machines, I just didn't see the need to include it. But just know that when you install, you have the choice of either the traditional LibreOffice, which is the free and open source Office suite, or FreeOffice, which is a proprietary system, but the free version is completely functional and works perfectly fine. I like them both. They both have their virtues, but they give you a choice when you're installing in case you want to pick one or the other. And so, yeah, there's a lot here that is going to benefit a lot of people right out of the box. The whisker menu is great. Desktop looks great. This all, fits together and works well. And like Phil says, it's the flagship offering, so you can't go wrong on Manjaro with XFCE. Okay, well, thanks for joining me on this, everybody. That was my quick look at all of the Manjaro 19.0 release candidates. Manjaro also has a ton of community-supported desktop options, so Deepin and Mate and Cinnamon and, oh boy, just about every desktop you can imagine. So they're all out there, and they tend to run a little further behind the main editions because they end up inheriting a lot of the work that's done there. So you probably won't see them updated immediately, but soon thereafter. So if you're running Cinnamon or one of those other ones, you can expect to have a 19.0 release fairly soon after the release of these three. Anyway, if you haven't tried Manjaro, I really think it's worth taking a look. It's a great desktop operating system. They do some excellent work to make it as straightforward as possible to not only use Arch itself, but to have the great user experience on top of it with a very tuned desktop, a nice curated selection of applications, and also a hugely popular and active community. Their forum is just bustling. There are so many people on there, not only people asking questions, but people helping others. So in terms of the community, it's just fantastic. And so, yeah, I have no affiliation with Manjaro. I've used their software for years and I just appreciate the work that they've done. Anytime something new's coming out from them, I'm always interested in taking a look. And like I said, if you haven't, I think it's worth taking a look. So that's it. Thanks again for joining me. If you liked, please do the thumbs up thing and consider subscribing for more videos in the future. And with that, I will say have a wonderful day, be well, and I will see you again soon. Take care.